Hi, first let me introduce Bob to everybody. Bob Luke has done a number of things in the industry. He was an on-set acting coach. He was a manager, private acting coach, which is what you are primarily doing now. That's my understanding. So actually, you can clear that up for me. But let me say hello. Welcome to the Acting and Modeling Success Summit. My name's Aaron Marcus, for those of you who are just joining in. And Bob, thank you so much for being here today.
You're quite welcome. My pleasure.
Hey, I wanted to get started by having you explain the different types of jobs that people can have in the industry, and then we'll kind of work our way into talking about preparing for pilot season. So the very first thing is, I'm sure most people have never really heard of an on-set acting coach. Would you explain what that is and how that's really different than being a private acting coach?
Uh, when I'm booked by a production company or a director to be on the set of a film or television show, uh, my job is to help the director get the product he needs. Sometimes it's when I was working like the final season of the Cosby Show as the on-set coach, we had two 4-year-olds. So I needed to make sure that they understood what they were to do and that they were able to do that for the director and for the other actors. So we weren't delaying everything by waiting on them to get there. That included coloring with them during lunchtime, lying on the floor doing that. You do whatever you need to do to reach the mental level of the individual. I almost had to lie on the floor and color with some of the older adults too, just to reach them. But it's your job is specifically to make the director's job easier and the shoot schedule more efficient.
Now, you are also dealing with older kids too, not just like real little kids on sets. So I'm sure a lot of people are wondering, these are actors. They get hired. They audition. Shouldn't they be able to do their lines? Why would they need an acting coach?
I was actually worked with a lot of adults on sets as well. But Cosby is actually a great example because Mr. Cosby liked to bring on different types of people. We had one week two basketball commentators, very famous ones, Dick Vitale and Jimmy Valvano. And they had great personalities and were a lot of fun, but they weren't necessarily actors. And so sometimes you have to help guide them and teach them how the system works. Sometimes it's a matter of just making sure someone remembers their lines, someone who has some problems. There are a lot of terrific actors that the memories just don't work the way they used to. But so, again, it all comes back to what is it that's going to, with whatever the individual's age is or their experience, what is going to help them to portray themselves most naturally and fit into that little type and job that the casting director hired them to do.
Now I'm curious. When you were saying sometimes for an actor that's having problems remembering their lines, what are some of the things that you can do as an on-set acting coach that will help them get through their lines?
Comfort. Usually, I think in any situation, auditions on the set, getting them to relax and feel that it's a very natural process. Some scripts are written much more almost distracted than others. They're a good sitcom script. It flows and the words just come. So this probably the strongest thing that you can teach anybody to help them remember things is to listen to what's going on around them and what others are saying, because someone else's words are always going to prompt yours. There is always a reason why you are saying what you're saying. This is I just spent the entire morning today teaching here privately, but teaching exactly that listening. I actually just was Skyping with a young lady in Pennsylvania, and getting her to just look right in the eye and listen to react and then to speak. The response is always the last part of it. So everything else, the focus, the listening, prompting those reactions, those all help you to remember.
You know, it's interesting because I've found that sometimes when actors are looking over scripts before an audition, and essentially they'll highlight their lines and then they'll say, okay, well, somebody says something to me, who cares? Okay, here are my lines, let me highlight those. And basically all they're doing is studying their own lines. And what a lot of people don't understand is that quite often it's the other person's lines that will teach you and give you so much information about who your character is. So, you know, to just cut out everybody else's lines and just try to remember yours, it's not really a good way to go into an audition.
Therein is created the one-dimensional actor because he's only trying to do one part, and that's speak. Their simple outline, I use my clients, 2 L's, 2 R's. First you focus or to look, then you listen, then what you see and what you hear then prompts you to react, and then, again, you respond. So the response, again, is the 4th part of the process. I always tell my clients, any script you get at an audition, if it's that day and you walk in the door and they hand it to you, if you have it 3 days in advance, if it's something you're working on for an audition down the road, or when you're learning the script, first thing you do is you read over the script to determine what's going on and determine who you're talking to. Who is that person you know that you can relate to? If you know someone who's that grumpy character, if you know someone who gets headaches that needs to know about aspirin, if you're talking in the scene to your mom, determine who that person is so that you can see them. You know what they sound like. Don't try to play to a ghost. They fly away. That makes your eyes blurt from the camera. Know who that is you're talking to. Second time you read it through, think about what the other person, as though you're the other character. What are they saying and feeling? You want to understand that so that then as you read it over the 3rd time, you're thinking, okay, I know what their point is. How am I reacting to that? And that's where you get your final product.
Wow, that's very interesting. Now, so I guess it really seems like then one of the key differences between being a on-set acting coach and what you do now primarily is, private acting coach work, is that, one is you're really just trying to help the actor on the set to make everybody happy, to get through everything, and then for the private work, you're really getting people prepared, whether it's for an audition, whether it's for a TV series, whether it's for the film. It's really much more specific oriented than just being a general on-set coach.
Yes, yeah, exactly. I still coach on sets for different things, but the real joy of the business. As you mentioned, I've been a casting consultant. I've done management. I've done things. The funnest part is the actual work process, and the training. Many really tremendously good actors or so-called stars will often tell you that the funnest part of doing a show or a film is the rehearsal process, where you get to play with things and learn things and develop stuff. That's where the real joy is kind of, and certainly for me is in all the things I've done. Certainly I loved acting, but I found that through directing and different things that the teaching was really the most fun. You get to play all day long, and the individual coaching is it's such a great thing to be able to see someone that you've helped to build and to find the steps to go when they become a young star. And I've been very, very fortunate with many of the kids that I have either found or met and helped develop to for them to become very successful actors. Josh Hutcherson is currently did Hunger Games, and certainly at the other end, Sarah Michelle Gellar, who I was fortunate enough to work with many years ago as a kid and help her to develop. I become a tool to help find the things that will work for them. Providing business advice is, works for some of them, but mostly it's giving them the feedback that helps them to grow, whether for the individual audition, for the actual job, or just I work with many as on a weekly basis, just to keep them primed. So an audition hits, if I'm not available, they can walk in that door and kick it themselves.
Now, moving on to managers, because that is something that you did at one point. Would you explain to everybody exactly what a manager does?
I generally say the manager is kind of a babysitter. Um, the the manager is, whereas the agent um, gets the breakdowns from the cast of people and is by law the one who's to submit for that. They've gotten where they sit behind the computer and push the buttons. The manager is much more directly involved with the, or their job is to be more involved with the talent to help them determine what they should be wearing, where they should be training, what their resume looks like, what their type is, how they're supposed to be selling themselves. A manager helps kind of prep their clients to go in and meet the agents and help set up those meetings to meet the right agents for them. Different agents don't often work for an individual actor, so you've got to find who it is that does work for them. And agents have three basic questions that they ask that the manager wants to make sure you understand. One is, how do you see yourself? What is your type? What the agent and manager always want help with determining who you are. So you want to know what your type is, and a good manager is going to help you to determine that based on the roles you can get submitted for. We all think, I always wanted to do Lieutenant Cable in South Pacific. Unfortunately, I didn't have the best tenor voice, and I was always going to be Eugene in Grease for a character role like that. So
Hmm.
I wasn't going to be the tall, handsome, beautiful tenor voiced guy. It took me a while to have to learn that. And once you know what your type is, you're going to be and what you're going to be submitted for. That helps everybody around you. Another question that's asked by representation is, where do you see yourself in 5 years? It used to be 10 years, but that shows you how much the computer has sped up the business. Where do you see yourself in 5 years? Do you want to be doing supporting roles in feature films? Do you want to be a lead on a soap opera? Do you want to be a role in a sitcom? Again, you're helping them to determine how to sell you and what to sell you for. You give them ideas, and then they're going to say, you know what, you're not going to do soap opera. You're not that. But you could be a great character person on a sitcom. So, again, the manager helps you to determine those things. The last question usually is, who do you know? Everybody loves to work with an actor who casting people already know and have seen there in the experience. Doesn't mean they've necessarily booked you, but if they know who you are, it's a lot easier to pick up the phone or on the computer, send you to them and say, would you see this person?
So it sounds like
Managers,
basically, oh, I'm sorry, go
go
ahead.
ahead. No, go
I was
ahead.
just going to say that basically it sounds like, we keep bouncing back and forth there. It sounds like basically the manager's job is really to look at the much bigger picture of the career of the actor
Exactly.
and be the great parent and help facilitate that and make that happen.
Absolutely. Very well put.
Well, thank you. Hey, so let's move on to pilot season, because that's something that people always hear about, but I don't think people really understand what that means. So would you explain what does pilot season mean?
Kind of like welcome to the club. I don't think anybody really understands it. The pilot season is initially meant to pertain to the 2 times a year that shows are developed, shot, and sold to the networks for play. They go through the process where a network may may want a show done. They may contact, have an idea. They can't bring in writers. They develop it themselves. Probably more so these days, different production companies, different people come up with ideas, shoot them, and then try to sell them to the network. And so then the beginning of the season, you'll see the pilot, play that first episode. That also is what draws in the attention. But there are probably, I don't know, 200 or 300 potentially pilots shot a year, or not a year, a season every 6 months. Of those, you may have 17 of the shows bought, maybe. So it used to be very specific seasons, like mid-August to beginning of October. And then, and that's sort of more the mid-season replacement time. The beginning of the year, mid-January to March, is where you get shows going that would then show up in used to be in September. Nowadays, because a lot of shows couldn't quite get in the swing of things. They would be developed, great ideas, great actors, and they just took longer and longer and longer to get pieces done. It sort of prompted a position today where more shows are shot throughout the year as opposed to just during that time. They're still sold to a network generally around that time, but at the actual pilot season, a lot are also shot then because we know that actors are there and ready for that period of year. There are always the kids who go to LA or New York for pilot season. We know we're going to have them, just like during the summer, we know we're going to have kids in to do commercials because that's when they're off from school. They can come to New York or LA, for that time. So we're very aware of those things. But shows are shot a lot throughout the year now instead of just during those seasons.
And so basically, I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, I was just saying, does that kind of give the definition of the season?
Yeah, no, actually, that was perfect. So when you have a client, and it seems like you are able to not only work with people in your studio in New York, but also you can use Skype. So virtually you can work with people from around the world and help them prepare before auditions. What kind of things would you do if somebody came to you and said, look, I want to start auditioning for pilot seasons. Here's a script that somebody just gave me. I heard, what you talked about earlier about, listening and reacting. Are there others, like specific things that you would do with somebody when they come to you and they want to start, auditioning for pilot season?
The first thing we want to see is what their bad habits are. Everybody picks up bad habits. If a young lady I worked with today had done a lot of beauty pageants, and those get kind of a bad rap at times in our business. It's not that we don't like the kids. I find that with many of the pageants, they learn how to speak very well. They have good interview skills. But pageants are about developing different types of things than the naturalness that we're usually looking for. So I make everybody get up on their feet. I've got an X at the end of the room. They stand on to deliver. Let me see how much they move, how much they sway. Pageant girls with pretty feet. We want to kind of break that because it leaves them open to a little bit of a sway. Models who are used to constantly moving. Soccer players, boxers, they punch. When they're talking, their body automatically punches or their feet kick. And you can actually see whether they're like tapping with one shoulder and then they get to the punchline and boom, the other shoulder moves. So you need to find out who the person is and what they naturally have and what they naturally don't have at the moment, and then start filling in those spaces. Let's get rid of those habits. Let's get you where you're stable and comfortable standing in one place so the camera can see you. Mm-hmm. Now, if you want to do stage, I can let you move a little bit more. But there's still that sense of being specific and more subtle for the stage. And that's very often a big thing that I deal with, is there are the actors who have done a lot of theater or gone to school for theater, and then they want to get the TV and film. And so we need to learn to, get them to narrow down a bit, be a little more focused, a little more subtle, and just understand the differences. I think a lot of agents are always afraid of people sometimes who have an extensive stage background but no on camera. They're afraid they can't make the transition.
Mm-hmm.
I think when an actor understands the difference, instead of just saying, don't do this, if you understand the point of it and are put in the scenario to be more real and natural, that you can certainly make that transition.
Sure.
So it's about finding out what the individual has and doesn't have naturally, and then what their training has provided or not provided, and then aiming them in that direction that they want to go. And a very important part of the entire process is patience. There is no such thing as an overnight success in any regard. Brad Pitt was suddenly an overnight success in Thelma and Louise, and I think he shot that after being in LA 8.5 years. It's a very common thing. It's the best overnight success takes 10 years. So,
hey Bob, I know we've got a bunch of questions, and because we're going to have to end things in about 5 minutes. So, Joel, if you would read the questions for Bob, that would be great.
Sure. Let's try to get to at least a couple of these. So, Bob, Annalise asks, do you recommend out-of-state actors coming in for pilot season? Most plots don't pay anything, do they? I think she meant to say most pilots don't pay anything.
Yes, most plots. Yeah. Hi, Annalise. Yes, actually, most. There are pilots that are non-union that do it for delayed, deferred pay or these things. But when we talk about pilots, we're talking about film pieces that are sitcoms or dramas and things that are union or in the process of becoming union that do pay. So certainly if you're experienced enough to be seen, if you have representation who can get you in on the auditions, certainly. But the most important part of that process is having a representative, an agent or manager, who can get you in that door for the auditions and that you're willing to stay. You can't just come up for the audition and then go right back home, because they might call you a day later to come back for a callback, and then you have to travel again, and then maybe another callback and travel again. And then when you shoot, you got to stay up here. Most want to hire local actors for that. So, putting the money away for the right time to come where you can stay for a while, I think is generally the best idea.
And, the other thing, too, is certainly you would be traveling to New York to audition at your own expense.
Right.
But if you actually book it and you're on, if you're in the pilot, then, you will be paid. And certainly your agent could certainly ask, if they would cover, your hotel and,
right.
But anyhow, that would be a nice kind of issue to have. But you would have to get to New York on your own.
Right.
Sure. Another quick question then from Mary Ann. She says, when do I know it's time to hire a manager? What would you recommend, Bob?
Hi, Mary Ann. There are a lot of, this is an internal question because there are a lot of views of what a manager is. There is the business manager. Many college students are taught that you don't get a manager until you have a career to manage. But that means those are the people who are going to handle your money and book your schedule and things. That's the advanced babysitter. For many young actors, having a manager to help them meet the right agent is necessary, or just to help them learn about the business. And that's where you really shop around. There are agents who don't feel that you need managers in LA, and then it depends on the coast. Managers can be very helpful in New York because you can freelance here with different agents for the same thing. And you would much rather have your agent contacting them and if you had to turn one down because someone else had already called for you, you'd rather have them mad at your manager than at you, because they know that's the manager's job. In LA, it's very often thought of that you need to have a manager as the go-between between you and the agent. Again, different agents feel differently about it. So if you have an agent, talk to your agent. See if they feel a manager is helpful. If you don't have an agent yet, talk to different managers to see what they can offer and how they can help you.
I would think that would also depend on where you're living as well. I mean, if you're living in a very small market and there are, two or three agents in the entire area, chances are that there might not even be any managers. And in that situation, I don't know that you would need one. But yeah, I mean, if you're, somewhat young and you're moving to New York or LA, absolutely, they can be invaluable to you.
Well, and when you're in local markets, yeah, you don't really need, because you have such close contact with your agent, you don't really need a manager in the middle. And the work is not paying generally as much that you want to give away another 15%. Of course, the print managers can take 20%. If also keep in mind that in the local areas, if you're in North and South Carolina or different zones, many of the agents, so-called agents there, are not franchised agents. They're not bonded by the state or franchised by the unions. So in essence, they're like a model agent, quote unquote. They're really managers. They just don't refer to themselves as that.
Hey, Bob, we've got to end things here. I just wanted to thank you so much for taking time out of your day and being a part of this summit. Everybody can see Bob's website. It's right on the screen. And if anybody is interested in doing some private lessons with Bob, you can get to him right through the website. It's boblukstudios.com. Bob, thank you so much, and I can't wait to see you soon.
Thank you very much, Aaron. Have a great day.
Thank you.